Hello and welcome to Total Saints Podcast, your weekly look into all things Saints FC. Firstly, in case any of you longer-term TSP listeners are wondering, no, this isn't a 2019 episode repeat. As mentioned in last week's pod, Martin is away this week, so having scoured the market for a competent replacement, no one could be found. So you're stuck with me again, Ben Stanfield, founder of Total Saints Podcast, chief bean counter nowadays, and part-time host. Thankfully, the rest of the lineup is far more tried and tested this season. It's Glenn Delacour, writer of the League One -10 blog, owner of Saints Web Steve Grant, and the Athletics dedicated Southampton correspondent Dan Sheldon. Evening, chaps.
Evening.
Oh, there's that enthusiasm I've missed so much. Glenn, let's get started with you. Good week?
Yeah, it's a good week. I'd just like to say, this comeback of yours, is this like...
It's like take that, isn't it?
Is it like Ronaldo coming back to Man United, or is it like Ollie Lancashire coming back to Saints? Where does it kind of...
Probably somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle, yeah. Well, yeah. Ronaldo's not going too well at the moment, is it?
Oh, what an afternoon that's been!
Yeah, that's amusing, isn't it? So, original question. My week, it's been a good week because my other thing that I do other than football is go and see lots of bands and live music, and it was my first visit after it all opened up again. So I went down to the Joiners and saw a band called the Ratons and a couple of other bands as well who were all really, really good. And I just wanted to do a little plug for the local venues, really.
They've done well to be able to reopen that place. It sounds
absolutely.
Like they were in trouble before the pandemic.
Yeah, I think so. So you know, in Southampton we've got the Joiners, we've got the 1865, we've got the Engine Rooms, and we've got the Brook. They're all sort of less than 1,000, and the Joiners is only about 200 people, and they need the support of the local people. So if there's bands you want to go and see, or just for a night out, get down there and support them, because once they're gone, sort of thing. It was another thing that reminded me that you need to support the bands as well. So it's not all about just streaming off Spotify. If you want to go and actually buy something off the band's website themselves, website itself, rather than just streaming everything. So that's my little party political broadcast for live music. So that's what I've done this week. So yeah. that was pretty good.
That's good. Delacour promotions in full working order there. So excellent. And Steve, as is often the way during a calendar year, you're out in Dubai again, aren't you? So how's that been? And we were just talking briefly before we started. You're at the T20 England match yesterday.
Yes, and you'll be unsurprised to hear it's insanely hot. About 36 today, I think it's been.
A bit like Scotland,
but it feels about 10 degrees warmer at the moment. I mean, I can hear the world's smallest violin being played in the background.
A man goes swimming, gets wet.
Yeah, but no, went to the cricket last night. It was a weird experience. I mean, obviously the ground was like barely a quarter full because basically they only put the tickets on sale 2 weeks ago. And so anybody who was looking to travel just wouldn't have been able to get over it because this time of year, flights to this part of the world are really expensive. But where I booked mine months ago, I kind of did all right. But they were only selling tickets in 2s and 4s for sort of social distancing reasons because they thought that was the best way of getting more people in. So they're theoretically operating at sort of 70% capacity, but no, they had like 5,000 in the ground that holds 30. So it was a bit odd, and obviously the game was just ridiculously one-sided. I don't think I've seen a sort of batting collapse stroke bowling performance quite like it, but I think we're going to see a few low-scoring games like that in this tournament. Just the pitches don't look great, but no, it was a good experience, and I'm off to Abu Dhabi on Wednesday for the second game. That's going to be proper hot because it's a daytime game. So I don't know if you saw the Australia South Africa game, which was at the same ground. Basically, some of the seats are actually on the grass bank, but where they obviously in the 2s and 4s that you have to buy your tickets in, what they've done is they've basically erected picket fences around little squares where people sit in the banks. So It looks like basically everybody sat in little sheep pens. I mean, I think I've got an allocated seat, so I think I'll avoid that sort of ignominy, but we'll see. Yeah, that should be interesting.
I love the fact you're going to be heading back to that one. Yeah, I love the fact you're going to be heading back to Dubai to cool down then. So there we go. So no, perfect. And Dan, long time no speak, certainly in person. And don't worry, I won't publicly mention beating you at golf back in the summer. So, but you all good?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Back to work this week. Well, the week just gone after a week off, and then got distracted by a couple of other stories that my place wanted me to work on. And yeah, it was good to be at the game yesterday, I must admit, and it was quite an entertaining one for the neutral.
Yeah.
How drunk did you get at the NFL last week?
Pardon?
How drunk did you get at the NFL last week?
To be honest, the NFL was more of a come down. I was incredibly drunk by about 3 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, and it didn't stop until about midnight. And then the thought of I had about 2 or 3 pints before I got to the NFL game, and yeah, I thought I can't drink anymore because I will just end up throwing up in Tottenham South Stand, which I didn't want to do. But I mean, it was an amazing game, to be fair. And one thing that stood out actually is because I've been to Tottenham Stadium, but only as like a journalist in the press section. How cool like that stadium is, like with the food court and stuff they had. It was just like, yeah, miles ahead of other stadiums I've been in as a spectator.
That's what £1 billion gets you, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you can just see how like it's tailor made for American football. And I left that ground thinking if there was ever an example for the Premier League not to allow people to drink.
Oh, definitely.
Inside the stadium, it was everyone at Tottenham throwing their plastic beer cups down to the front of the stands. I think that was the clearest example they're going to need not to let people drinking.
Yeah, I got drenched, and a guy 2 seats in front of me had a cup land right square on the back of his head, which I imagine was probably quite painful.
Thrown by Dan.
Yeah, that was my mate, honestly.
I know. Well, speaking of food, I know Martin has kept things a lot more professional than I tended to, Dan, but it's the autumn now, nearly winter. Surely, if not already, Castle-Sheldon is crying out for a slow cooker dinner, isn't it? Is the box finally open yet?
I don't know where the box is, to be honest. It must be in the garage somewhere because I've not seen it upstairs. And I was talking to my girlfriend about it the other day. Or maybe we should get the slow cooker out. And she was like, "Do you know where it is?" And I was like, "No, I don't." She was like, "Neither do I." So it'll be a case of just going to the garage and having a look around. But
there's a task for this week.
It will come out soon. It's getting to that kind of wet temperature now, isn't it?
Totally.
Cold enough. So.
Yeah, not in Dubai though, but there we go.
No,
but
true,
excellent. All right. Well, coming up on the podcast this week, reflections on that 2-2 draw versus Burnley, the upcoming Carabao Cup tie with Chelsea, and also a preview of next week's Premier League trip to Watford, underpinned by our brilliantly committed patrons. This is Total Saints Podcast, episode 173.
This is the Total Saints Podcast with Ben Stanfield, Steve Grant, Glenn Delacour, and The Athletic's Dan Sheldon.
Saints' latest Premier League encounter saw the always attractive Burnley arrive at St Mary's, the match eventually finishing 2-2 after a pretty entertaining 90 minutes. Dan, Steve and Glenn weren't holding out much hope on last week's pod for an overly exciting match, but what did you make of it all in the end?
I was probably thinking along the same lines as them when I got there. Like, it was just going to be attritional, like this is going to be a painful kind of 90 minutes to endure, but I was pleasantly surprised. It was a bit chaotic at times. There was a really good spell, and particularly good with the crowd as well, kind of 10 minutes before half time when Livramento did eventually score, where Southampton just went close, like chance after chance after chance, and you just thought, is it going to be one of those afternoons? And then Livramento to get his goal. I mean, the Redmond miss before that, the Walcott miss, which I thought was poor. Yeah, it was just a mad game, really. Like, not one you'd expect, Southampton and Burnley to play out. Like, Burnley aren't in too many entertaining games, but it generally was a very entertaining game. I mean, I was disappointed by Southampton's performance because I think all that good work they've done defensively at the start of the season, you know what Burnley are going to do, yet they still didn't really it was a long ball that ended up with, I mean, Cornet was great, but Southampton know that they're going to be pumping it long. So I was a bit disappointed by that, but yeah, I mean, all in all, it was, as I said, an entertaining game for the neutral.
Yeah. Steve, one of those could have won, could have lost, but a draw seems all right in the end games, or a sense of frustration, do you think?
I think mostly the latter. I mean, certainly they had sort of 2 or 3 presentable chances that they didn't take, but the bulk of the chances went our way, and our finishing was pretty wayward. I mean, we'll kind of give allowances for the two that hit the woodwork, but yeah, for the most part, our finishing just wasn't quite up to scratch. I mean, we had, I think, 19 shots, but only 4 of them were on target. Now, I think 5 were blocked as well, so it's possible that some of them were possibly on target as well. But I think you've got to, I mean, when particularly a side like Burnley, who actually aren't actually as good defensively as is often made out, especially at the moment with Ben Mee being unavailable. We created the chances, and we should have scored 3, 4, 5 goals, but didn't. So that's frustrating. I mean, we did score 2, which is an upgrade on most of our games this season. But yeah, it's one of those frustrating ones. But I think bigger picture, last 2 games, our performance sort of getting towards the final third has been a whole lot better. And I mean, there's a kind of worrying coincidence here that's coincided with James Ward-Prowse not being in the team. I wonder whether there's something in that. I mean, obviously, we know we spoke about it last week in terms of Diallo's different attributes, in that he's more willing and able to dribble with the ball, past players in that midfield position, whereas Prowse will often lay it off or lay it round the corner for somebody, which is probably a lower, a sort of higher percentage play, but doesn't necessarily open up the game quite so much. So yeah, I think Ralph's going to have an interesting dilemma next week when Prowse is available again, to see exactly how he fits all these players into the team. Because I mean, based on these 2 performances, I'm not really sure you can drop Diallo.
No, I'd agree. And we'll come on to talk about that, Dan. Get your thinking cap on, because I was going to pick that up with you about if and where Prowse fits in next week, etc. But Glenn, you were at the game as well. Your general reflections on the 90 minutes, and I was interested to get your view. I heard you talking about Gineppo last week, and maybe apart from creating the goal against Leeds, hadn't done much. So were you surprised to see him dropped and/or Walcott recalled?
Well, I'm not as positive about yesterday's game as other people seem to be. I didn't understand the selection of Walcott. I didn't understand why he stayed on the pitch for 75 minutes, because I thought he was mainly awful. So I'm not surprised that Stuart Armstrong didn't start, because he just doesn't look 100% fit at the moment. But yeah, the inclusion of Walcott was a surprise. I think the start of the game, Burnley went in with a midfield 3, and that seemed to cause us a few problems. And Diallo and Romeo seemed to struggle to get to grips with that. And it wasn't until the goal went in that they did start getting to grips with it. And we came back into the game, and we got to the end of the first half, and we were sort of on top for most of it. And that was the time when we missed all the chances and eventually scored. I was very disappointed with the defending, as Dan pointed out. I thought both goals were bad from a Saints point of view. I mean, Livramento's let Cornet run off the wing. He's completely unmarked, so whether he didn't communicate with Bednarek or whatever, at the end of the day, Cornet doesn't look the biggest, and he's had a free header and scored. And the second goal is a standard Burnley goal. I mean, Mr. Deitch will think it's a great goal. It's a ball up to Wood. He's battled. Ball's dropped to a midfielder. None of our midfielders have picked up. I think it's Westwood. He lobs it forward, and the lad's completely unmarked again. Bednarek's wrong side. He's kind of there, but he's wrong side. And it's a good finish, to be fair. So they can say it's a good goal. I just think that's bad. And against Burnley, you've got to do the basics. You've got to head everything and win the second balls and keep everybody marked. And we didn't do that. And that second goal reminded me very much of the one that Vidra scored against us a couple of years ago, when it was a similar sort of thing, just a lob forward from midfield, and he smashed it. And so I was disappointed. I didn't think Ralph managed the game particularly well. It seemed to be, there was one period in the second half where sort of Elyounoussi came inside, and we didn't seem to be playing with a left winger at all, and that seemed to stagnate the attack. We didn't seem to, after it went to 2-2, I never really felt like we were going to push on and win the game. But and at the end, I mean, personally myself, I kind of settled for a draw with about 10 to go, because I felt like Burnley were more likely to score from another Route 1 goal than we were to carve them open. But at the end of the day, it's a point, and it's another game undefeated. But I don't think Burnley were great, and I feel like we should have won. I mean, we've played 2, in my opinion, poorish teams the last 2 weeks. We've got 4 points, which is okay, but I do feel like it really should have been 6.
Yeah, I was going to ask a bit later on, but bearing in mind you've touched on it now, Glenn, why don't we pick up on that? Because do you think that's a bit of the frustration with Saints fans? Because I wrote down here obviously the fact that he didn't make a change until 74 minutes when he took Walcott off and brought Stuart Armstrong on, obviously to a great ovation. You could tell the Saints fans wanted Armstrong on, but he almost seemed to imply after the game that he'd done that because Burnley had changed their system and he wanted to almost counteract it. And I suppose that's maybe been a bit of a sense of frustration around the manager the last couple of years, is that we don't always sort of take the first step forward. We almost sort of seem to react, and I think I would agree with you. I mean, I was surprised Walcott was on for that long. So do you think maybe that is the frustration around at the moment a little bit?
A little bit, but to be fair to Ralph, he has been more proactive this season. There's been a couple of times where he's made changes at half time, and I was surprised to see Walcott come out for the second half. To be honest, I thought there would be a change at half time, but there wasn't. And then the longer it went on, then it becomes frustrating when you get to 75 minutes. And he brought Armstrong on to try and sort of like reignite things, because after Burnley got their goal, we kind of stopped playing, and it was almost like we didn't react particularly well to their goal going in, and then Brozier got a knock, and that seemed to sort of change things as well. So I'm not, he didn't. For me, Ralph's had good days and bad days this season, and I know people will agree or disagree with that. But for me, he's been a little bit up and down, and I don't think yesterday was one of his better days, put it that way.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Look, Steve, let's get on to some positives and chat about one of the most exciting young players that I think Saints fans have probably seen in quite a while. And believe you me, we've had a fair few to choose from over the last 20 years or so. Tino Livramento, looking at Squawka yesterday, he had 44 touches, 4 duels won, 4 ball recoveries, 2 fouls won, which was the most, 2 chances created, which was the equal most, 2 shots, which was the equal most, 1 tackle and 1 goal. Just how good do you think he is and can become? And how good was it to see him score his first goal for Saints? Of course, he's just 18 years old.
Yeah, I mean, he looks the real deal already, which is fairly mad given that he's had 10 senior appearances in his whole career. And yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the sky is the limit for him, but it's one of those you knuckle down, you do the right things, and the talent will eventually show through, I think. And I think that's the attitude thing is one of the key things that we've discussed regarding Brozier before, because that's obviously been a topic. But you can see that Livramento, like his attitude is absolutely spot on every game. There's no messing about. It's all right. I know what my job is here, and I'm fully prepared to sort of get my hands dirty if I need to and do what's necessary. But driving forward, I'm looking at how I can hurt the opposition rather than what they're going to do to me. Because I mean, as we said, his either his marking or his communication for their first goal was not great, obviously, and I mean that's been a kind of recurring theme for us with right backs, hasn't it, over the last few years. Cedric constantly was non-existent at the far post for crosses into the box, that sort of thing. So I guess it's kind of nothing new to us, and therefore you might expect one of the centre backs to be covering a little bit more. But no, I think he's had a few quiet games, which I think is to be expected. But generally, when he plays well, the team plays well. And I think that's quite important, that there is a recognition of his importance to this side already, which unfortunately doesn't bode well for Kyle Walker-Peters, because actually I don't see how he gets in this team at the moment. Because why would you move Livramento from right back to right midfield when he's clearly playing so well at right back? And I mean, to be honest, it's not as if our sort of wing options are necessarily all playing badly. We're kind of all right in that position. It's just little moments in games where we're not quite doing things. I mean, as Glenn said, Walcott was fairly poor. I think wasn't great in his last game either. But it is. I mean, he must be showing something in training to be getting picked. And obviously we don't see what goes on behind closed doors at Staplewood. So, yeah, I mean, I think most people would prefer Stuart Armstrong to be playing, but again, as said, it's clear that he's not fully fit yet. So we're going to be easing him in gently, in the hope that we don't break him again, because he's so important to the way that the team knits together. We can kind of do it for 45 minutes to an hour, but in order to be able to do it for a full 90, we need him at full pace. And realistically, we may even have to wait until after the next international break to see that.
And that goal, Dan, as you mentioned earlier, came after a really good sort of 5-10 minutes or so for Saints, with 2 glorious chances for Walcott and Redmond somehow missing, as well as Tino hitting the post, of course. It was followed by Brozier's second goal in 2 games early in the second half. Another well taken finish from a player who, like Tino, is really starting to make an impact at Saints. So you liking the look of him?
Yeah, you can't not be impressed. I think when he turned up, he sort of had an arrogance, yeah, in the way he played, and without really kind of doing anything, or he came and he expected to be starting because he'd come from Chelsea on loan, and I think Ralph had to kind of swiftly remind him that that's not quite the case. I want to see you putting the effort in training. If you do that, you'll play, and you'll start. And now, I mean, are there many arguments to suggest that he's not the best, that the club's best option going forward as a striker? Outscored both Adams and Armstrong already this season, and I think when he ran through on goal yesterday, and Theo was alongside him. Sorry, I don't think anyone for 1 second thought Theo was going to receive that ball. That was just clear. Broja had only one thing in mind, and that was scoring, and that's that kind of killer instinct that good strikers have. And he's only young, of course, and it's kind of, let's not build him up too much, but what I've seen of him so far in games that, especially in the Premier League, I mean, he definitely threw off that Carabao Cup tie. He didn't fancy that at all. But in the Premier League, I mean, if that's what he thinks his stage is, he's only been impressive, in my opinion. I thought he was good against West Ham when he came on. Didn't see Leeds. Obviously, I've seen the goal. And then yesterday, he was impressive. And I think when he went off, you could tell he was off the pitch. Ralph kind of said after the game that what his kind of ankle issue, I think Ralph said it was nothing too serious and he should be fine. So that's important. But he's gone from, coming in with a bit of an attitude problem to probably the first striker Ralph writes down on the team sheet. So that, he deserves credit for kind of turning that around. Because once Ralph does get an opinion of a player, it's quite hard for them to turn it around.
Well, Adam Armstrong's an interesting one with that, isn't it? So yeah, but and no comment needed, Glenn. But it did make me feel even older that Tino and Brogier's combined age is 38, so that's still 2 years less than mine, to be honest. So even I feel old. So there we go. But just finally, then, Dan, sort of Glenn mentioned it earlier. I mean, all in all, that's 4 points from Leeds and Burnley over the last week or so. Do you think that's okay to build on, or do you think Saints should have been getting 6 out of 6, really, based on the fact that both those teams almost turned up not really, wanting to sort of attack Saints too much?
I think you'd like to say 6 from 6. I think Burnley were there, as Steve said, Burnley were there for the kind of taking yesterday, and had either Redmond or Walcott scored, you'd probably imagine Saints would go on and win that game. But it's weird, and I've kind of reflected this in my piece. You kind of feel like when they hadn't won a game, because of the teams they were playing, you kind of wondered whether, how much pressure were they under. Now all of a sudden we're in a really ironic way, a run of games where the expectation is that they're going to be winning these games because they're playing Burnley, Norwich, Watford. Villa will be a difficult game. But the expectation is that they should win those games. So it's like a weird, it's funny how football works like that, that you could argue, is there more pressure now than there was 3 weeks ago, even though they've won a game, because they're playing teams that, we all think they should be beating, and they're their kind of direct competition. For me personally, I think, 4 points out of 6 is a fairly good return if they can go and build on that and beat Watford. I think, yeah. But then Watford got a good result as well, didn't they, at the weekend? So that game doesn't look as easy as it may have done 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting how it pans out against Watford. And I mean, Norwich, if they don't beat Norwich, then I think we should just pack up and go home, to be honest.
Famous last words.
You're listening to the Total Saints podcast, going to the heart of all things Saints FC.
Well, after back-to-back home matches for Ralph Hasenhüttl's side, it's now back-to-back away trips this week. Thankfully, neither are too far from home, but combined, they've just scored 12 goals this weekend, exactly what we need. In a moment, I'll get the guys to give their thoughts ahead of the Watford match next weekend, but before that, Saints travel to Stamford Bridge on Tuesday night for the Carabao Cup round of 16. Chelsea themselves expected to be without Romelu Lukaku, Christian Pulisic, and the German Shane Long, Glenn's words, not mine, Timo Werner, at the very least, just like they were in their 7-0 win over Norwich. Glenn, well, Saints will obviously want to continue their cup run if they can. Is this a bit of a free hit for them?
I think it's a game where we're going to play all the squad players, so you're going to see all the ones that are not in the team at the moment. So you're going to see the likes of Forster, Walker-Peters, Lianco, Teller, Armstrong, and Adams. Adam Armstrong, that is, and Che Adams. You're probably going to see all of those, but we can still put a fairly strong team out on the pitch. I don't see us putting our first choice league side out. I assume Brozier can't play unless the Carabao Cup's got some strange rule. So I think first and foremost, it will be a case of giving those players a game. If we win, it's a bonus. Chelsea will obviously rest some as well. But we all know the strength of Chelsea. I mean, I see this game as a scouting trip for next season. We'll see some more Chelsea academy players and see if there's any coming to the end of their contracts. And because they seem to be our best players at the moment, so let's keep that strategy going until next season. But as for the game itself, I kind of see it as a free hit. I'm not expecting us to win, but if we do, great. And just with the Newport game, I think Dan touched on this, and it's a very good point. The players who came in looked like they all had a point to prove. They all wanted to prove that they should be in the starting lineup, and now you've got Brozier and Ellie Nusi, probably amongst others, who are now fixtures in that starting lineup. So people should be looking at this game, especially the ones that have recently dropped out the side, like Armstrong and Adams, as a chance to really stake a claim to get back in, because there are places up for grabs, but you have to put in the performances in games like this. So it's certainly got something riding on it individually for players, but it's not going to define our season whether we if we get beat by this by Chelsea.
Albeit both sides will likely make changes, Steve. What do you think Saints and Hasenhüttl took from the recent Premier League game there that they might be able to use in this match?
Difficult to tell, because what we're going to be up against is going to be so very different. I mean, as you say, Lukaku and Werner are unavailable, although realistically they probably wouldn't have played anyway. And Chelsea do have just a vast variety of different ways that they can hurt you. So I wouldn't necessarily expect Chelsea to set up in the same way that they did in that league game. As you say, we're probably going to make a number of changes ourselves. So our own system may change. I wouldn't expect us to start with the system that we played the second half in, where we made the change and went with three at the back. But I mean, who knows? I mean, if Lianco's going to play, then I think realistically you probably want centre halves.
Defenders.
Well, yeah, you probably want centre halves either side of him, giving him a bit of support. And I guess with that you probably have Walker Peters bombing down one side, and I mean, I guess you might argue stick Valerie on the right. Walker Peters on the left, perhaps, to give them some games because they've not played at all. Whereas obviously Perrault is seemingly a fixture at left back now and has been absolutely fine, I think. So they might want to give him a little bit of a rest. But I think, it's going to be one of those where ultimately the way the game pans out will largely depend on how seriously Chelsea take it, because it may well be that they see bigger fish to fry and kind of don't quite go as seriously as they need to beat our sort of first and a half team, if you like.
And they squeezed through against Villa, Dan, in the last round. I always try to look for positives, don't I? I know Martin's been doing his best, but prior to that recent 3-1 defeat, Dan, Saints were unbeaten in their previous 3 visits to Chelsea going back to 2019. So I'm going to try and be positive here. It's been a relatively happy hunting ground the last few years, so Saints need to sort of bear that in mind.
Yeah, Ralph's not had an awful record at Stamford Bridge, to be honest. So yeah, you can kind of take that and take some confidence from it. But I think Steve really just sort of summed it up there, that the tie will largely depend on what Chelsea want to do with it. If Chelsea want to go out and win that game, then they've got the players, the depth and the quality at their disposal to go and do that, regardless of kind of, Southampton could play their strongest 11, but if it's one that Thomas Tuchel looks at and think, I fancy the Carabao Cup, I'll go and put my best players on the pitch. They're better than Southampton's. And yeah, I don't think you can really add too much kind of analysis or thought on than what Steve said, that, this tie will ultimately depend on what Chelsea do. But, if Chelsea kind of don't have their eye on the ball for whatever reason, then, the players that will come into the team, you'd like to think that, that's their opportunity to put a stake in to get into the starting 11 at Watford. So that's the good thing. And I also think, and I put this to Ralph yesterday from the embargoed section of the kind of Carabao Cup, that I think a cup run is actually quite important for this squad, simply because of the players that he's now leaving out of the team. And if all of a sudden they go out to Chelsea, those players, your Kyle Walker-Peters, Moussa Djinappo, and other, they're going to be out of the team until maybe the FA Cup, or when it gets a bit busy over Christmas. it's okay. Kind of at the moment, they're probably playing enough to kind of keep them happy. And they've got the cup where they know they're probably going to be starting against Chelsea, but you take that away from them, then it just adds a different kind of dynamic that Ralph's got to manage, to try and keep people happy when they've lost a key part of when they were going to be playing.
Yep. No, it makes perfect sense. And I was going to ask Glenn, sort of, there's always this, they always talk very respectfully about each other, Tuchel and Ralph, but you get the feeling that they both clearly want to beat each other as well. There's that sort of friendly rivalry almost. So do you think that, bearing in mind they have just beaten us 3-1, that Ralph might have a little bit more incentive and might think about playing a slightly stronger side to try and win the game?
I don't know. I think managers tend to put that kind of thing aside. I mean, I think Ralph will pick a team for Watford and then
work backwards.
Whoever's not in that will probably play against Chelsea. But interestingly, I was just looking at Chelsea's lineup for that game that you were talking about.
It was quite strong. Yeah, quite strong.
Reece James, Chilwell, Kante, Loftus-Cheek, Saul, Hudson-Odoi, Ziyech. So it's not bad, is it? So if they put out a side anything like that, it's going to be a tough game. But there does seem to be a little bit of an extra rivalry between Ralph and Tuchel in the same way that there is with Jurgen Klopp, I guess. But yeah, they've the other two managers have got slightly better resources than we've got.
I know. So all right, well, we're not going to do overall predictions. We'll do them for Watford. But Steve, come on, let's put you on the sort of mantelpiece here. Do you reckon Saints are going to get through or not?
Probably not. I think we'll probably just be edged out 2-1, possibly.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Well, once Chelsea's out of the way, Saints make the 30-mile or so further trip to Watford for next weekend's Premier League match. What have you made of Watford so far this season, Dan?
Yeah, Watford have kind of been Watford, haven't they? And that result against Everton, I was kind of tracking that score and couldn't quite. It was like 11, and then all of a sudden 5-2, and I was like, blimey, what happened in the kind of final few minutes there? But yeah, it's just kind of, that's Watford all over, isn't it? They do this to try and get a manager bounce. That's what they do all over. And I think would you be surprised if it didn't work out for Ranieri and they sack him in like 2 or 3 months' time to try and do that, like get that bounce again?
Didn't have much of a bounce in this first game, did they?
No, they didn't. But they you have to give credit. They've just put 5 goals past Everton, which against the Benitez side isn't entirely too that's a fairly good effort. I'd still like to think Southampton should have too much quality for them. I think Watford are kind of, when I look at relegation this season, I kind of have Norwich and Watford as the 2 that will go down, and then the other one's a bit more up in the air. So I'd like, it's a game that Southampton should win. It's a game they have the players to win, but you just never quite know with Ranieri, with Watford. They're a weird club. They do weird things every now and then. So I actually can't call that game, other than I think Southampton should have just about enough quality to beat them.
Yeah, and as everyone will know, Steve, obviously they recently sacked Cisco Munoz and replaced him with Claudio Ranieri. And as Dan just mentioned there, I mean, going from losing sort of 5-0 last weekend to winning 5-2 this weekend, it's crazy, really. I suppose I was going to ask from a sort of fan point of view. Obviously, we've got Dan's view as a journalist, but were you surprised with the decision to sort of get rid of their other manager so early in the season? And were you subsequently sort of surprised by Ranieri's appointment?
No and no, I think. I mean, Watford, as Dan said, Watford have always had this reputation, basically since the Pozzos bought the club, and have kind of operated it in a very sort of Italian way, really, in that they've got no particular issue hiring and firing kind of on a bit of a whim when they see the tide turning in the wrong direction. And yeah, I mean, other than they beat an absolutely pathetic Villa on the opening day, and I think who else they beaten? They beaten Norwich before they then won at Everton today. So yesterday, sorry. So yeah, I don't think there was any particular shock that Cisco got the boot. Ranieri, I mean, he was available, and he'll be a popular choice for a period of time. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, he's at the end of the day, he's won a title in this country, so he's got pedigree, but that's not really what Watford need. They need somebody who can battle against relegation, and I mean, obviously failed pretty spectacularly at his last attempt. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I mean, they'll be up for it Saturday. Obviously, having come off that fairly extraordinary second half at Goodison. I mean, the level of booing from the home fans must have been off the scale. They love a good boo up there, but
and they're just waiting to get a Benitez as well, aren't
they? Yeah. But I think, I mean, as Dan said, we should still be good enough to beat them, and basically, as a general rule, you keep Ismaila Sarr quiet, and you should have more than enough to beat them. That's kind of the general trend for Watford in like their last 2 seasons in the top flight, that he's the key player. You stop him, you stop them from creating anything serious. And as long as we've got a plan for that, then I think we should be okay.
Yeah. So maybe more must not lose than must win potentially.
Well, I mean, the problem is they're above us at the moment. So I think it's one of the games we've got to look to try to win. If we put in a half decent performance and only get a draw out of it for whatever reason, then okay, you kind of sort of draw a line under it and move on. But I think it's one that will have. I mean, certainly when the fixture list came out, you looked at this run of games. I mean, Leeds less so, but certainly Burnley, Watford, Norwich as a run of 3 games is kind of almost exactly what you want to get yourself up and running for the season. I mean, we've beaten Leeds, probably should have beaten Burnley. So now if we can go and get wins against Watford and Norwich, then all of a sudden you're probably knocking on the bottom end of the top half with, I mean, what would we have then? 14 points on the board. So yeah, I think all of a sudden everything has a completely different complexion on things when if that happens.
Yeah. And Glenn, alongside trying to find positives, of course, I always like to tempting fate as well, as regular listeners will know. Saints are unbeaten in their last 7 league visits to Watford, including 3 wins, the last one being that 3-1 a couple of seasons back. How do you see this one going? And I was going to ask, do you think the fact that we're playing Watford away rather than Watford at home is more of a positive, because that potentially means that they have to come on to us and that will leave the gaps that we can hopefully exploit?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to get our away form back, haven't we? We've got to win away from home sooner or later, because we haven't done it for a while, and I think this is a very good opportunity to do that. I think Watford are a ridiculous club. I can't be bothered with them, to be honest. They're the sort of club I never know anything about, because everything changes and I just can't keep up. I know Ranieri, obviously, when he took over. If you'd have asked me who their previous manager was before Ranieri, wouldn't have had a clue. Honestly, not a clue, because it's another random guy who's been around for 6 months and then he's gone. And that's it. You look at some of their players. I mean, I watched Match of the Day yesterday, saw their game against Everton. I mean, Everton were pathetic second half. I mean, and Josh King looked like a world beater. And every time I've seen Josh King play, against Saints or against anyone else, he has looked anything but a world beater. But
so he'll coming then.
Yeah, I mean, he'll obviously be, have loads of confidence. They've got Sissoko in midfield, who is kind of immobile, but if you let him run the game, he will run the game. So that's a key battle as well. But I think their last home game, they got absolutely stuffed, didn't they? So they'll be looking to put a performance on for their home fans. They will see us as a game that they can certainly win. So hopefully we get the chance to play on the break a little bit, and it should play into our hands a little bit, and we should be good enough to, as Steve said, we should be good enough to win it. But I certainly don't see us losing this game.
Yeah, and just as we were kind of talking there, I mean, obviously they don't have a game midweek like we do either. I appreciate we'll probably be playing second string, but they are literally going to come into that game off the back of a 5-2 win, which in true Saints style is not exactly what we need.
I don't think it really matters. We know they're going to be confident. We know they're going to be, they're going to be up for it. And we also know they're going to have Craig Cathcart as centre half, who's absolute garbage, and Ben Foster in goal, who's older than me. So, it's that they are what they are. If we play well, we should beat them. But if we're not up for it and don't do the basics right, same as a Burnley game, we'll struggle. But I think the opening of the game is going to be very important, because they're obviously going to be flying from scoring 4 goals in 10 minutes or whatever it was against Everton. So we really need to start the game well. We don't need to be going 1-0 down in 5 minutes, sort of thing. So
Smashing. All right, well, just before we do our predictions, we touched on it earlier then, Dan. One boost for Saints will be the return of captain James Ward-Prowse from suspension. How or where, given Diallo has performed pretty well against Leeds and Watford, do you see Prowse fitting in as before? Do you think Ralph might have to tinker with things to potentially keep Diallo and Prowse on the side?
Well, I think given how Ralph plays and the kind of two midfielders, I don't think he plays Romeu, Diallo and Prowse. I think one has to give way, given that Prowse is the captain and he's kind of Mr. Southampton, Ralph's mate and all of that. I feel that he'll probably be the one that he'll come back into the team and Diallo will have to make way. But I kind of touched on this in a piece I wrote in the week. I think it would take a really brave call to drop Prowse, simply because he does embody everything Hasenhüttl wants from his players on the pitch, and he leads by example in that regard. But I think we've all seen Diallo just does add something completely different to the team.
I really like him.
Yeah. When he plays, Ralph uses the word dynamic, and that probably is the best word to use. I think for as good as Prowse and Romeu are, you kind of know, you know what their strengths are, and you know what their weaknesses are, and their strengths aren't. Well, Prowse's strengths in particular, he's not going to pick up the ball outside of his area, charge forward 30, 40 yards, lay off a pass. Now, I'm not saying Diallo does that often, but he's got that in his locker. I've seen it a few times. He'll pick up the ball and he can carry it forward. And Ralph also mentioned that when I asked Ralph ahead of the Burnley game, what does Diallo offer you that Oriol and Prowse can't? And he said, carrying the ball forward. And I just think that's a really, for me, I think it's so important for a team like Southampton to have that player that, so it's not always so formulaic. Southampton are very rigid in their structure, but if you've got a player that can do something a little bit different from deep, then I just think it will add so much value. And the line I thought in my piece was really kind of it. It would take a brave manager to drop Ward-Prowse. We could all sit here and say maybe it's the right thing. Well, no, but let's not say drop Ward-Prowse, because I think that reflects negatively on Diallo. It would take a brave manager to keep Diallo in the team when their captain is fit and ready and not suspended anymore. So, but Ralph's paid to make these calls, and if Diallo is going to offer Southampton, more of a threat going forward, and will help unlock doors, and is just as good at doing the other midfield stuff that Prowse does, then ultimately Ralph's paid good money to make that call, and captain or not, that's a call that he should make if he feels it will better the team. Whether he will or not, I don't know.
So your prediction then, Dan, ahead of the predictions, is what? Diallo out, Prowse probably back in?
My guess, and this is just kind of a guess, would be that I'd be surprised if Prowse doesn't start that game, which is a very politician's answer, because
it was a very politician's answer, but yes, fair enough. All right, cool. Well, let's get on with some match predictions for that trip to Watford then. Obviously I've been listening the last few weeks. You've all sounded relatively positive, so I think both you, Glenn and Steve, went for wins against Burnley. So how are we going to get on at Watford then, Glenn?
That's a difficult one. Seeing as I'm actually going to the game, I'm going to be positive about it, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 win.
Have you been to Vicarage Road before?
Yeah, back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I've not been for a long, long time, and we got beat then.
I think the last time I went, Lewis Boamorte scored twice and we lost 3-2. I think that might have been Steve Wigley.
20
possibly?
Years ago. No, that was under Dave Jones.
Oh, was it? There you go. Yeah, it wasn't very good, but there we go. I think it was like Boxing Day or something like that. But,
yes, it was.
There we go. Steve?
Yeah, back in the day where they gave you the whole end.
Yeah, that's right. So there we go. But what do you reckon then, Steve?
I just think we should just be too good for them. 2-0.
2-0. Crikey, a rare clean sheet, eh? Dan?
I'll go 1-0 Southampton.
1-0, excellent. All right, I'm going to be moderately positive, because obviously I can't come back on the pod and predict us to lose, so I'm going to go for a very, very positive Stanfield 2-2 draw.
This is the Total Saints podcast, proudly underpinned by our TSP patrons.
Well, that's it for this week's pod. Thank you for listening to the four of us. Hopefully I've not let Martin down too much. Thankfully, for everyone's benefit, he'll be back again next week. Glenn, Steve and Dan, appreciate your time and view as always. Before we go, a shout out to our Matt Letizia TSP patrons, Colt Baker, Ed Busy, Phil Cook and Dave Ernsberger. Likewise to Nick Reed, our Francis Benali patron. Big thanks to you guys and all our global patrons for the ongoing support of this pod. If you'd like to get in contact with TSP to relay any feedback, questions or comments, you can contact us via email, totalsaintspodcast@yahoo.com. The social media handle is Total Saints Pod on both Twitter and Facebook. You can visit our website, totalsaints.co.uk, or YouTube site, just look up Total Saints Podcast. You could even become a TSP patron via Patreon, which is patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast, where we have 4 tiers to choose from, ranging from £5 per month to £20. All support is always welcomed and appreciated. Right, until next time, TSP listeners, keep marching in.
'Cause we are